Hello, and welcome to the Freedom Challenge online podcast. Here at the Freedom Challenge, we strive to do good by helping enslaved women and children to do more than you ever thought physically possible, and to do it together by connecting women with a heart for a hurting world. We hope you enjoy your time being informed and encouraged with host Tracy Doherty and our amazing guests. So let's get ready and join Tracy for this week's episode.
Welcome back, Freedom Sisters and listeners. This is your host and the director of the Freedom Challenge, Tracy Doherty. The Freedom Challenge is a movement of passionate women who participate in physical challenges that test our limits while raising funds and awareness that disrupt the cycles of oppression and poverty that can result in human trafficking. Now, one of my favorite things about this role is meeting other women with similar passionate hearts. And our guest today reached out to share about this mission that she and her husband have followed God and the gift of God in them. And that passion is coffee. I'm so thrilled that we finally get to be together to talk about Talitha Coffee in San Diego, which is where I live. And their mission is to end human trafficking, to support survivors one sip at a time. So I am intrigued by this mission. I'm excited to have you, Jenny. Would you please share about your experience and your journey and how Talitha Coffee came to be?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been quite a journey for us, and it's amazing to see how God uses all of the pieces and puts things together. And down the road, you're looking back and you're like, wow, how did we get here? So we've been working in anti-trafficking for 15, almost 16 years now. We started out doing a missions trip. And it kind of all went from there. So for us, I come from a family line that's been affected by intergenerational trafficking and exploitation. And for me, I knew that there was something that I wanted to do about this issue. I knew that I was going to be an overcomer myself, and didn't even really recognize that everything that I had experienced was exploitation until I was an adult and actually working in this area. So we've been working for quite a long time. Started jumping into anti-trafficking work in our early 20s, working on the streets of Los Angeles and providing outreach and advocacy to victims on the streets. Also partnering with other organizations, going into strip clubs and doing training with organizations internationally as well on outreaches and different things like that. So through all of this time, we just noticed this issue over and over of survivors leaving the life, going through healing, going through all of this internal work, and then coming on the other side, getting ready to rebuild their lives and finding that there were little to no opportunities and resources for them to do so. So my husband had started roasting coffee as a hobby in 2014. He started with a popcorn popper on our stove top, and we realized really quickly he was really incredible at it. So he graduated to larger and larger roasters. But this really started out of our home, roasting coffee for friends and family. He started selling bags just as a way to help fund the work a little bit on the side that we were doing. And I started getting increasingly frustrated and disheartened because I was coming back from these outreaches, seeing the women that we had helped to leave or provided resources for, and they'd go through recovery and then they'd come right back to us and they would tell us about how they were facing all these barriers and there were little to no opportunities. And that's when my husband said, I think that we should be an answer to the issue that we're seeing and we should start a coffee shop. So we started our very first coffee shop in 2020 in Los Angeles, which was a wild time. And we started off with one small space and knew that we were going to grow from there.
When I hear this, I'm chuckling to myself. Just yesterday, I was at a local spa. I was getting my coffee and I look up and there is Talitha Coffee and I got to enjoy it. And it really just brought home these God deposits, the way that the Holy Spirit shapes our life, from our stories that bring healing to the interests and the investment that you're making in LA till 2020 to start a coffee shop. Like that's probably a whole podcast in and of itself, to the fact that here I am walking through this spa and I see the Talitha coffee. So I think what hit me about your story when we originally talked was so often we have something in our hearts and we look in our hands and we go, what do I have? What do I do? And the fact that you together as a couple and your beautiful pack of children, I think you said 6, which I love, went, we have enough in our hands. We have coffee. And here we go. And how the Lord has expedited that, because here we are in 2026 and things are just getting started. I love it so much. It's a testimony for all of us who are listening and thinking, what do we have in our hands, God, to help, to contribute? I want to hear more about how coffee is actually paying like real needs for real men and women in this area. How is it elevating dignity, and more about your mission for that?
Yeah, this is what gets me so excited, because I think that coffee seems like such a simple thing, and but it really is changing the world. It actually is. It is one of the most consumed beverages in the world, and a lot of people will admit that they drink more coffee than water, which is not, I am not advocating for this, but it does help us. But we are seeing that something so simple as taking our skills and bringing those to the table and just being faithful and saying yes. Really, honestly, when it comes down to it, we just said yes. And we were willing to take a risk. And that's how we've ended up on this really wild journey. So in 2021, I actually approached a friend because I knew we had our shop and we were small and we were doing it. We had survived a year, and we were building a coffee company. But I knew that in that space we could only hire a couple of survivors, and I felt like what was on our lives was to create something larger and to provide a lot of employment opportunities. And so I reached out to a friend who has the experience and the knowledge to scale business. So he takes things from large to small, he grows through acquisitions. And I asked him to join us. I said, my husband is an expert in coffee roasting, and I am an expert in anti trafficking, and you are an expert in scaling. So, can we all team up together and do something incredible? He was like, sure, I'll help you build a business plan. And, it was kind of like, yeah, I'll give it some time. He asked if I wanted to hire 5 or 10 survivors at that point. And I looked at him and I'm like, what are you talking about? I want to hire at least 1,000. And that's when he got really interested. And so that's how we ended up growing in San Diego, because he's from San Diego. And our first opportunity for an acquisition came up in San Diego because he was sold at that moment and joined our team full time, quit his job, pivoted his life, and we started growing from there. But one of the things with coffee that really got us curious in the beginning is that coffee is something that can change lives from the berry farms all the way through to the baristas that are serving it. Coffee is an industry that has an incredible amount of potential, but it also has a huge amount of exploitation that's happening on the farms. And so even whenever you have, some very fancy labels that look fair, sometimes those rules are only applying to a certain amount of people. Where we're working with importers that are making sure they're actually going and visiting large and small farms and doing surprise visits and making sure that there's a code of conduct in place where we know that people are being paid fair wages and we know that people are being treated fairly. So it's not like working really hard during the day and then being exploited at night and things like that. And so we're working with these types of relationships so we can be intentional to make sure that exploitation is not happening from the very origin of what we're doing, all the way through. We have that clean supply chain, and then it comes in and we have survivors working with us. We have people working on the back end behind the scenes doing sheets and inputting data, and we have people that are working in the roastery, and then we have people that are working in our cafe spaces as well. So when somebody comes to work with us, it is need to know. Only the people who absolutely need to know that this is a survivor know, in order to create that support for them. But we give them that freedom to really share their story if they want to. So we have survivors that are working in so many different areas, and coffee is quite literally changing the world.
I love the clean supply chain. That's a beautiful way to explain it. And also educating us on those tricky and sneaky ways that show up in our everyday products, from coffee to clothes to all of these things. We hear more and more about that, but sometimes we just get going and it's not the top of mind. So things like this really do bring us top of mind. Let's think, let's pause, let's consider how things are ethically sourced and engage in those matters. And also expanding the conversation around anti-human trafficking, which often goes to just the sexual exploitation piece, but really knowing that this shows up in the world, in our country, but abroad in so many different forms, which we have talked about that on this podcast before many times. But thank you for reminding us of it, because it's important to consider. I'm very curious to know how the survivors find your program. Can you share how that looks and give us some insight to how are people finding you?
Yeah. So we are focused on three different things. I think when we started off our company, we realized that we could be a company that gave to great efforts, or we could be a company that did that and also did the work as well. And so we really kind of narrowed it down, and we're like, what are our three things that we do as a company? So first and foremost, every position that we have is open to survivors first. We have a website where they can go and they can apply for internships, for jobs, for training. The second thing that we do is we provide specialty level coffee training. This is really high level coffee training that is super approachable. And it's a way for them to begin building their resume, building their confidence, and also building those skills for the workplace. The next thing that we do is we have a very comprehensive network of care. And this is collaborative efforts, whether it's on the nonprofit side or other businesses, where we are teaming up together to fight this issue together and to provide opportunity and hope. So when we look at that and we say comprehensive, we're looking at the different barriers to reintegration that these individuals are facing. So housing, reunification with children, therapy. We're looking at the psychosocial, we're looking at the tangible, we're looking at the practical and the community integration factors. And we are making sure that we have partners that are addressing all of these issues. So when somebody comes to work for us, they have that support in place if something goes askew or if they have an area that's lacking in their lives. Now, those partners also work when they are doing this rehabilitating work that they're doing, when they have somebody who is ready to transition back into the workplace, they send them our direction and they know that we can be a great next step opportunity. And I say that because our partnerships are so incredibly important and we really couldn't do what we're doing without them. But we're growing. Like you said, you were just in town the other day and you saw Talitha. So we've also been getting some organic applications coming our way too, which is really exciting. And we've had some just really, really wild experiences. I've had people come that were re- on the receiving end of the outreaches that we were doing on the street of LA. And they've come back around and they're like, I left, I went through, and now I'm here and I need a job. And we're like, this is why we started this company. So we've had a lot of full circle moments as well.
Something that stuck in my head from the first time we talked was the need for practical resumes. Sometimes we don't think about that. How people's lives have been disrupted or horrified in these areas and come to get a meaningful work or a job. And it's like, I don't know what I would put. And that is so practical, right? Like community, belonging, meaningful work, all human things being restored. Those are such basic human needs. And really, sometimes we miss them. The value of those, small but big things. And you're offering this sense of wraparound, resourcing, communal. How do we help connect you to these resources? But very practical as well, which I loved. Your coffee school, I think you call it. I loved it. I would be interested in maybe hearing one of your favorite impact stories, if you can share that in a way that feels comfortable for you. possibly without names, but something that just has touched your heart and keeps inspiring you to keep going?
Yeah, man, it's hard to narrow it down sometimes. I think I just did a big update with our leadership team the other day because I think sometimes we can get so down in the weeds and, looking at creating we set out to create a business that was highly successful. So a very successful business model that was also highly impactful because we want to prove that the two are not mutually exclusive. And sometimes you can get so bogged down in running a very large scale business that you have to like get your head above the water and be like, yes, this is our why. And so I was just giving a full report the other day to our team, and it's really incredible because sometimes we have those really big stories where this survivor that went through Talitha is now running a nonprofit or going to college or different things like that. And then sometimes we have these stories where it's like this individual came to us and they were struggling with a lot of insecurity. They were just beginning to learn computer literacy and now they're going to tech school. And or hearing women talk about how they're going through our programming and it's not only affecting their workforce readiness, it's also affecting their marriages and it's affecting the way that they parent their children. And I think that those things are just so exciting to me because it's not just the really big wins, it's also these little things where somebody's like, I got confidence and I just filmed my story with A21 and things like that, which is really exciting. I think, as I alluded to earlier, we did have this moment where I was sitting in an interview with a woman and I noticed that her area code was from the Los Angeles area. And I said, wait, where are you from? Because you're applying from a totally different area. And she began to share her story with me. And what I realized was that she was out on the streets of LA being exploited. And our teams would come through handing out gift bags and doing outreach. And she was never allowed to talk to us because she was kind of newer to the life, but she was being groomed on the streets and she would watch those who had been in the life longer kind of talk to us and engage with us. And one day she got the confidence to reach out and cry out for help when she saw law enforcement coming by. And so she ended up leaving and getting out of exploitation. And then she, fast forward, goes through recovery, goes through program. We're partnered with the organization that she's going through. And we're sitting in this moment and she was talking, sharing the story of these teens coming out and all this stuff. And I realized I'm like, those were our teams. And now here we are all these years later sitting in an interview with you. And this is exactly why we started this company. And so we have those victory stories as well. It's just so many things like the big and little wins that just
Yeah.
really keep you focused.
Yeah. The full circle moment of remembering planting seeds all those years ago with the team, the faithful hard work in that. And then all these years later, there's this reunion. But it also shows you that just the kind of connectedness to faithfulness. And sometimes we don't see the outcomes for a very long time. And also the slow pace of growth, of courage, of restoration, and the patience needed in that real work. And I mean, it's not all the time we get to see that kind of full circle moment. That's really special. Thank you.
We say like this is not for the faint of heart because I think there are those moments where sometimes it's years and years later. They say that it takes an average of 7 attempts for a victim to leave the life of exploitation. And some of that's because it just takes a lot of courage to face something new and to leave what's familiar. And sometimes it's barriers. So those are reasons why we started what we're doing. We want to be a place that helps reduce that statistic.
Beautiful. I said this early on, but what I love about your story and program is how it's connected to what was available, what your passion was, what your history was, and how God intersected that story with your yes and your consistency and has built something beautiful. Interesting with the Freedom Challenge. I mean, we collect and gather because we would consider ourselves a movement of women who deeply care about this issue. And one of our encouragements is really to get involved locally, to care locally. We're primarily focused on the international pieces, but what a transformed heart, what happens in a woman when she's willing to look at something and say, I may not be able to solve this. I may not make this eradicated, but there is something I can do and contribute. So I would love to invite you into speaking to some of those women who may be listening to this podcast and have maybe thought about this thing. I'm remembering a woman from years ago who did traffic jam, and she made all of these preserves and she sold it, and she made thousands of dollars just by looking and going, what's in my hand? And am I willing to do that? So maybe just and some encouragement about that in your own story, and reveal to us maybe what was one of the first steps that you remember taking. I mean, you've spoken a little bit, but directly that question, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as I mentioned, I came from this life of exploitation. I came from really extreme poverty, and I ended up being adopted at a young age. But that exploitation continued through different ways throughout my childhood. And so it really affected my confidence for sure. I remember just, having this tension of I know that I can create pathways. I know that I can do something to fight this issue. That was stirring inside of me. Like, I can be a part of the solution. I know that I can. But at the same time, this deep insecurity of like, who am I? And what resources do I have? And also knowing that I wanted to build a family that never knew exploitation, that was so far removed from that life where my life looked so drastically different. And I met so many everyday heroes along the way that really instilled confidence in me and really made me believe not just in myself, but in humanity and believe that amazing things can happen when we just say yes. And I met one woman early on who would go to thrift stores or get donated fabric, and she would make scarves, and then she would sell these scarves to help fund a home that was rescuing children in Thailand. I met other people who were starting other businesses overseas that were providing employment opportunities for women leaving exploitation. And, just the really practical work of just showing up. I mean, we started our outreaches and we just had these little gift bags with candy and nail polish and lip gloss. And we would just go out on the street. We literally would just show up and we would give these gift bags, and we were consistent in showing up and consistent in building relationship, and so showing that we would be people that they could depend on, that they could count on to show up. And so much of that is it, right? Saying yes and showing up, and asking yourself, what do I have? Is it jam? Is it scarves? Is it coffee? With our outreaches, we had a couple of really cool moments where one, we had a survivor ask how she felt. Like, she's like, I don't feel like I can go out yet, but I want to do something. And so she began crocheting scarves. And in the winter, it gets cold in LA. And so she was knitting these scarves that we would take out to the women, and we would say, hey, these scarves were actually made for you by another survivor that left the life and is rebuilding her lives. Or we had another, like a grandma who she's like, I don't know what I bring. Like, what I do in my free time is I write love notes to my grandkids. And so I said, well, will you write love notes from grandmas for our outreach bags that we were going out on the streets with? And we would go out on the streets and we'd have our gift bag and we'd say, hey, there's a little love note from grandma in there. And that just meant so much to these women because they'd be like, oh, yeah, I miss my grandma. Or I never had a grandma, or different things like that. And just showing up with these little things that you have and you never really know where they're going to go. Like I said, my husband started on a popcorn popper in our kitchen and then graduated to the porch with a little bit of a larger machine. And then, it just really grew from there. And it was just putting ourselves in a place of saying yes. We had no business being people that started a business. But here we are all of these years later, and God has been so faithful to bring really strategic people into our lives, and we've been really intentional to build those relationships.
Notes from grandma. I am absolutely enamored with that idea because I am a grandma. So it just touches my heart deeply. The simplicity of that and how that would just touch a little core place in a human heart in such a visceral way. You are a gem, Jenny. I am so glad that I got to introduce you to this community, and tell us how we could get involved. I mean, there's a subscription to your coffee. We can give gifts to the coffee school that would help empower women and men both to start making some headway to make a change? Tell us a little bit more
Absolutely.
about those practical ways.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about coffee is it is a way that it pulls everybody to the table, right? This is a way that you can take something small and make a difference as well. So when people sign up for our coffee subscription, you can order coffee to your home directly. You can do that as much or as little as you need. And every time that you do that, you are actually providing hope for those who are coming through our company. Yeah, we also have the San Diego Coffee Training Institute. And this is another incredible way to get involved. If you're local to the San Diego area, you can come and we do classes from everything from like the home enthusiast that wants to learn to brew or latte art at home all the way through to coaching and consulting for companies starting shops and training their baristas. So it is very comprehensive. This is the program that survivors come through. And when you come and you sign up for one of those classes and you participate in those, you're paving the way for other survivors to do these classes as well. And then there are so many practical ways. We have wholesale options for those who are have businesses that want to serve Talitha coffee. If you have a church and you want to switch over your Sunday coffee, this is another great way to get involved. But there are so many practical ways that you can be involved in the work that we're doing.
And we will have those ways in the show notes of this podcast if anyone would like to engage with that. We want to champion and support and be a part of partnership with you, Jenny. And I'm so grateful that I could have this time with you because we now get to pray for you and you're going to be right smack in the middle of our hearts, rooting for one another. And that is beautiful. And, maybe as we leave, you could leave me with what would be one thing when we think about what you're doing, what is just, you only get to pick one that we could pray into?
Yeah, I would definitely say that we are a company that is growing really quickly, which is so exciting. But we want to continue to be a company that grows really well and really intentionally. And so we have so many opportunities coming our way, from opportunities to acquire other businesses, to people who want to invest in the work that we're doing. And we just want to be really intentional with every yes that we give. And so I would say that the prayer is that as we grow, that we grow in the right ways. The Lord has been all over this company from the very beginning. The name, every step of growth, everything we've done has come from that place. And so I want to be a company that continues to grow in that way. And so I think we want to be very intentional.
Thank you for sharing. Yes and amen. Everyone who heard that, stop the podcast and pray right now into that heartfelt prayer. And we will be joining you in that. Thank you for being with me today. Yes. And until next time, let's do good by helping enslaved women and children do more than you ever thought physically possible. Lots of activities on the home front for the Freedom Challenge. You can check it out on our website, thefreedomchallenge.com, and do it together by connecting women who have a heart for a hurting world, women like Jenny and women like you. God bless.
Thanks for listening to the Freedom Challenge online podcast. If you liked what you heard, join the fight to set women and children on a pathway to freedom across the globe. We are a proud ministry of Operation Mobilization USA and encourage you to learn more at thefreedomchallenge.com and omusa.org for how you can get involved. Follow us on Facebook, on Instagram at the FCUSA, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a review to let us know what you think. We'll see you next time.